Township has made an attractive offer to the Detroit Pistons and the Detroit Lions to locate to Oakland Township. While the two teams now charge $25 for the average ticket to a game at their present locations, relocating requires cutting prices to an average price of $20 per ticket. The Pistons' demand function is given by QP equals 200 minus 6 PP plus 2 PL, while that of the Lions is QL is equal to 150 plus 2 PP minus 5 PL. Notice that this problem is asymmetric. Draw up a payoff matrix determining the revenue that the two teams can make if they remain at their present locations and if one or both of these firms locate. The payoff matrix requires that we determine the revenues, and in order to determine the revenues, we need to plug the prices that are given into the demand functions. We obtain the quantities and then multiply the price times the quantity to come up with the revenue. Those are the entries that will go into the matrix. In the first instance, we're going to start by having both prices be $25, and then we can solve for QP. QP will be equal to 100, and QL will be equal to 75. 100 times 25 gives us a revenue for the Pistons of $2,500, and the revenue for the Lions will be 25 times 75, which is $1,875. So 2,500 and 1,875 are the entries that go into the upper left-hand cell in our matrix. We're going to work on the bottom right-hand cell where both prices are 20, and we see that by plugging in 20 for the prices, we can get quantity for the Pistons equal to 120 and quantity for the Lions equal 90. The revenue for the Pistons will be 20 times 120 or 2,400, and the revenue for the Lions will be 20 times 90 or 1,800. We're going to enter those numbers into our matrix. Bottom left-hand corner, that's the revenue for the Pistons, and the top is the revenue for the Lions. So we have the top left and the bottom right cells filled in. And now we're going to work on the cells which are off the diagonal. We're going to plug in a price for the Pistons of 20 and a price of 25 for the Lions. This is the situation when the Pistons relocate and charge the lower price, and the Lions do not relocate. We're going to obtain a quantity for the Pistons of 130 and a quantity of tickets for the Lions of 65. The revenue for the Pistons will be 20 times 130, which is 2,600, and the revenue for the Lions will be 25 times 65, or 1,625. That takes care of the bottom left-hand cell. We're going to work on the cell where the price for the Pistons is 25 and the price for the Lions is 20. Plugging in those prices into the Pistons demand equation gives us a quantity of 90, and the same prices plugged into the Lions equation gives us a quantity of 100. Price of 25 times the quantity of 90 gives us a revenue for the Pistons of $2,250, and a price of 20 for the Lions times 100 tickets gives us a revenue of $2,000. We've now set up the entire payoff matrix, and now the questions that we need to answer relate to whether or not the teams have dominant strategies, and if so, what are these dominant strategies? The next question asks what price would maximize the Lions' revenue if it was the only one to relocate, implying that we should not decide that the price of 20 would actually maximize revenue, but we have to use a formula to determine that. And then the last question would be what price would maximize the Pistons' revenue if it was the only one of the two to relocate. In order to determine whether or not the teams have dominant strategies, we have to look at the payoff matrix and follow the principles that were taught earlier. Remember, we defined the dominant strategy as a strategy that dominates. So if the Lions were to stay and charge a price of 25, the Pistons would be better off charging a price of 20 when they relocate. 2,600 is greater than 2,500. And if the Lions were to relocate and charge a price of 20, the Pistons would be better off relocating, revenue of 2,400 versus a revenue of 2,250. Remember, this is a revenue problem, so since the goal is to maximize revenue, we might get a different outcome than if we were to maximize profit. We're going to stick with the questions that are being asked, And let's look at the Lions now to see if the Lions also have a dominant strategy. So we're going to be looking in the horizontal direction. When the Pistons charge a price of 25, the Lions should relocate because they make more revenue, 2,000, when they relocate. When the Pistons relocate, the Lions can make 1,800 or 1,625. Clearly, the 1,800 is greater than 1,625, so the Lions should also relocate. We can see that both the Lions and the Pistons will have dominant strategies here, and the numbers have been circled to show you what the decisions should be to determine the dominant strategy. Notice we circle both entries in the bottom row for the Pistons, so that says the Pistons' dominant strategy is to relocate. We also circle both numbers in the last column, suggesting that the Lions also have a dominant strategy, and that is to relocate. When we circle two entries in the same cell, we come up with what is called an equilibrium. So there's one equilibrium in this problem, both firms relocating, and notice that we have a prisoner's dilemma here because both firms will make less when they relocate than if they stayed. However, because of the overwhelming pressure to relocate, both firms will relocate, especially if this is a one-period game. Both firms are trying to act in their own best interest, and that's why relocating dominates staying. We now need to answer the question, what price will maximize the Pistons' revenue if it's the only one of the two to relocate? And we plug the price of 25 in for the Lions, and then we try to calculate what price the Pistons should charge. So we simplify QP equals 250 minus 6 PP. We differentiate the revenue function to get marginal revenue, set equal to 0. We obtain the revenue maximizing price for the Pistons of 20.83. Finally, maximize the Lions' revenue if it were the only one to relocate. Again, you plug in the given price for the Pistons, 25, which means the Pistons are not relocating, so they're charging the price of 25. We get a demand equation, QL equals 200 minus 5 PL. RL equals 200P minus 5P squared. We differentiate that with respect to P to get the marginal revenue, and we get 200 equals 10 PL, or PL equals 20.